For today's webinar, we are going to be going through the Ohio NIBRS certification process, the code setup, the case data entry, the NIBRS data entry, and the data file submission. So we're going to be going through those steps in the order of which way every department would take them. So for the first one, obviously, you've got to get certified in NIBRS first. So for the certification process, what you're going to be doing is entering NIBRS data for up to 3 months. There's going to be 3 months of data entry for Ohio NIBRS, and that can either be the next 3 months, or what we normally do is take months that you have already submitted data for. So if you're submitting UCR summary data, they are going to compare your NIBRS data to that UCR summary data. So we would take, the past 3 months, so this is May right now, we would probably say start with April, and then also you can do March depending on how much data you have for those months, and then we'll get May at the very end. So again, you can either do the next 3 months or historical data. They don't really care, they just have to have data that they can compare between UCR summary and NIBRS. So one of the first things that you would need to do during the certification process is set up your NIBRS codes. So we're going to go over a little bit of that setup through here right now. There are some other fields that we're not going to go over, but we're going to go over the big ones in here. If we go to setup down at the very bottom, the first one I want to look at is going to be the crime and incident codes. So if we come over to crime and incident right here, and let's look at one that I know is set up already. I've got the simple assault set up, so we'll go to that one. So if we come right here to simple assault, we'll jump into that code. And this is going to be what your normal crime codes look like. So you've already got your crime codes in the system. What you would need to do is add some fields to that so that you can use those same crime codes to report NIBRS for your department. So there's 3 fields that are going to be important for Ohio NIBRS. One is going to be the UCR offense. I know it kind of gets confusing right there because the FBI uses UCR offense for NIBRS. And then there's also UCR data. UCR data is going to be for the UCR summary reporting. And then right here, UCR offense is going to be for NIBRS. So we've got a list of codes for your department. So we've got a list that says this simple assault is going to be a 13B and also tell you the crime against. So we've got the UCR offense, and then down here, you need to mark the crime against between those 3. And again, we have a document that goes through all of them for NIBRS that tells you that. So for a simple assault, we'd have a 13B, and then the crime against would be a crime against person. You've also got crime against property, which would be like a larceny, theft, or a robbery. And then a crime against society, which would be like a drug charge or something like that. All right. And then one other field that's specific for Ohio is going to be the state offense code right here. This is a large list of codes that your state came up with for all of the codes in the system. Now, some of them are simple, like there could be a simple assault or aggravated assault or larceny theft, and those would have a code. And then it goes even deeper than that, where a larceny theft may have this code and then an A at the end for a specific larceny theft. Again, we do have the documentation for that so that you'll know which ones or which codes go with the correct offense code. But that is all you have to do for the crime code setup. You would put in the UCR offense, the crime against, and your specific state offense code. And you would do that for all of the crime codes in your system that are reportable, reportable for NIBRS. All right, past that, other than the crime code setup, you've got the geo file setup. So if we come to geo file right here, you'll click on that, and we'll do Parkwood Hall. So in here, you've got right here a NIBRS address type. So these are all codes that we provide to you. We've already got them in your system, or we can import them into your system for this NIBRS address type. And then all you have to do is choose the correct address type for that location. If you are at a college or university, most of them are going to be school, college, university. And then you'll also want to have just the basic street name, street number, street name, city, state, all of the address information, because that's also going to import into your NIBRS review, which you'll see in just a second. All right, we'll save that. And then the last one that is big, that is, kind of time consuming to set up at the beginning of it, is going to be the property and evidence codes. There is more setup than just these three, but the other ones are very small. They're just, they probably take a minute to set up and they're done. So if we come into category right here, we'll go down to property and evidence, and then we'll go down to property type. So not all of mine are set up correctly. Mainly most of these are set up to be FBI Nibers, but Ohio has a different set of codes for your property. One of them that is set up right, which you'll see later on, is going to be this close and FERS. So what you would do in the system, these would be your codes. These would be the property type codes that your officers are used to seeing in the system, used to putting on property. And then you would come in here, choose your code, and then map it right here, translate the above property type to the following NIBRS property description. So this section would be all of the correct NIBRS property descriptions, and you would just map whatever your code is up here. So say this didn't say clothes and furs, say this was sweaters, and you wanted to map it to clothes and furs. You would choose that, and then if an officer puts in a sweater as the property right here, whenever it goes into the NIBRS review, it'll import in. The point of all of this setup on the back end is to make it easier for you to report it and for the officers to put in data that will help you report it. So now, from the crime code setup, from the location setup, from this property setup, whatever your officer puts in as the crime, as the location, and as the piece of property, you've got it set up to where whatever they put in, it'll import into the NIBRS review. So whenever you're going through and checking it, all you have to do is just check and make sure everything looks good. All right. So other than that setup, there are a few more that I'll talk about in just a second. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and jump in to our first case. We've got two examples here for our cases. We've got a simple assault and the vandalism, and then we've got a larceny theft that we're going to look at. All right. So right here, we're going to go through our case and look at what information from the case imports into the NIBRS review. So I'm going to go kind of detailed on this one, and then the second case, I'm going to do it a lot quicker to kind of show you how you can quickly go through and edit stuff on the cases. So for this first case, the information that'll import in from the face page is going to be the date reported, and if you had a date occurred from and occurred to, that would import as well. And then the location right here. So like I said, all of this information for the location will import in. And you saw that we marked Parkwood Hall as a 52 code for school, college, or university. All that will import as well. And you'll see once we get to the NIBRS review. We'll come down to our incident tab right here. We've got simple assault and vandalism. Both of those are set up already on the crime code side. So what I showed you before, setting them up with the UCR offense code, the state offense code, and the correct crime against, I've already got those set up for these two. All right, and then we'll go to the name section, and you'll see we've got right here the victim information, and this involvement type, depending on what it is, will determine how that person imports into the NIBRS review. So Mary Markison is going to import in as a victim, and then Marcus Marison is going to import in as a suspect. All right, and that'll actually import in their age, race, sex, and ethnicity. So once the officer puts this information in, all of the other information will import in as well. All right. And you'll also see for the suspect, if we go into edit linked info, this will bring up all of the information for that person that is linked to this case. And I've got description in here for physical description. Ohio also requires a lot of physical information, physical description information to import in as well. All right, so let's exit out of that. And we'll go to properties. So again, this was a simple assault and a vandalism. So we do have a piece of property in here, and we've got bicycle marked as damaged or other. So if we edit that, we can come up and see that property category, whenever an officer puts in this property category and property type that they're used to putting in, it'll automatically come down here, and damaged will put in the correct NIBRS type property loss, and the property type for bicycle will import in as bicycles down here. And then the only thing they need to put in is value. So it was a $200 value damage. All right, we'll save that. And that's it for the case side. So we've entered all the information to the case that will import to the NIBRS review. So let's go ahead and jump in to the actual NIBRS review. We'll come down to this NIBRS tab, go over to Start New Review, and this will open up in a new window. So there's a lot of information on this first tab, but it's not as daunting as you might think. You've got your incident number, you've got your date and time and reported time, and you've got cleared exceptionally, which this is going to default to in, but you'll want to make this blank if you don't actually have an exceptional clearance date. So to make it blank, you'll click the X button right there, and that'll go blank. Now, all of this other information down here, besides the case location, and I will touch on that real quick. You see here this case location pulled in from the location that was on that face page. So all the information for street name, street number, and all that imports in from that screen. All of this information right here only applies if there was force used. So you can see it's all grayed out. And if there was force used during this call, you would hit yes, and now you would come in and put any other officers that were at a different agency. So you'd put the agency's ORI numbers. You would put in the most serious observed offenses, and you would just order those. So right now it's marked as unknown. You can change that to enter a value. And that would just be based off of the offenses that are in your offense list. And then other agency officers who applied force. So you can put in the number of officers from the other agency who applied force if that applies. And then down at the bottom, you've got other information. Just did the officer approach the subject? Was this an ambush incident? Initial contact circumstances? And was a supervisor present when the force was used? These are all going to be drop-down menus where you would just choose what applies to each specific one. All right, but there was no force used on this one, so we'll hit no. And one other thing I want to show you is the cargo theft button right here. This cargo theft is going to only apply if there was a theft on this actual call. So this is a simple assault and vandalism, so it doesn't matter here. NA is the correct answer, but if I change this to no because I'm not sure, and I hit save, you'll see it pops up an error message. And you'll get these throughout the NIBRS review if you're putting in something wrong. It'll check and say, no, cargo theft must be NA if none of the UCR offense codes are any of these right here. So remember, the simple assault was a 13B. We put that in as the UCR offense code. And that doesn't apply here. Vandalism also isn't one of these numbers. So now we can come here, put NA, and hit save. And that way it worked. Now we'll come over to our offenses, and we've got simple assault and destroying public property right here. If we go into simple assault, you've got your code right there. You've got your bias motivation, which is going to default to no bias. But if any of the other biases do apply, you can put that in there. And then you've got offense was completed or attempted. This only really applies to larceny thefts or anything like that. If the theft was completed, then you can put a stolen property. If it was just attempted, then you wouldn't put a stolen property. So it could apply to a burglary as well. If there was a burglary but nothing was stolen, it was just attempted, then in property, you can just put none. And then you've got a couple check boxes for if the offender was suspected of using any of those. All right, and then all of these over here are going to be related to a burglary. So during a burglary, was force involved? Yes or no? The method of entry for a motor vehicle theft, the method of entry for a burglary, and the point of entry, and then the first and second locations for the point of entry. And those all have drop-down menus for what you can choose. All right, and then down below that, you've got the type of criminal activity. And let's say that I'm finishing this and I want to just hit save. I don't think there's any other information I need to add, so I'll hit save and close. Again, it'll pop up and let me know I have to have G, J, or N whenever the offense code is this 2903.14, which is that simple assault. So I'm going to come in, those are all gang related, so I'm going to hit no gang involvement. And another one that we see a lot is this weapon or force involved types. A lot of times people will say simple assault if it was just someone punched another person, there was no weapon involved. And so they would put 99 or something like that. But a lot of places look for personal weapon, hands, feet, teeth. So make sure if it is someone punching another person, you put that code in for weapon or force involved. All right. And then you can see down here, the location and premises, you can see it pulls in that location type that's mapped from our location on the case. All right, and then any methods of operations that apply to that. So you can see if any of these apply to this specific call, but for this one, none of those do. All right, we'll save and close. And we'll look at our vandalism. Now for this vandalism, we come in here and nothing else really applies. Nothing applies, so we can hit save and close. All right, we'll come down to property. Let's check our property in here. We've got our damaged vehicle. We've got our bicycle. Oh, sorry, damaged vehicle. We've got our damaged property, our bicycle, and value of 200. That all pulls in, and there's nothing else we need to add for this one. You can always come over to validate segment as well, just to click validate and check to see if this specific property segment is good. And then at the end, we'll hit validate all to pull it all in. You've also got the import button and add. Import will be if you added something to the case and you just want to import that in, or add will just let you add a brand new one. All right, so we'll come down to suspect. We'll click on our suspect. Remember I said it pulls in the age and then all that physical description information, the race and sex. You can also come down here and put in any scars, marks, or tattoos from this list. All right, we'll save and close that. So everything imported for that suspect, and we're good to go for that one. Now we'll come down to victim. We've got all of the information that imported in for the victim. One important thing is that we need to map this victim to the offenses that are related to it. So both of those involve that victim. And let's say I'm new to Nibers. I don't really know. I may not know what to do in this situation, and I think I'm done on this page. I'll hit save and close. And again, it lets you know type of injury should be completed if individual or police officer is the victim type. So we've got individual as our type of victim. Come down here, and we need to add a type of injury. So we're going to put apparent minor injury. You've got aggravated assault and homicide circumstances. You can probably guess that those only apply if you have an aggravated assault or a homicide. And then down at the bottom, LEOCA information only applies if you have the type of victim as a law enforcement officer. All right, we'll hit save and close, and we'll save. There we go. And we can check it again, just make sure, okay, no errors found, so that one's good. This case just has a suspect. There's no arrestee on it, but if there is an arrestee, you can come in here and add. Also, if there's an arrest on the case itself, so if you have a name here and this was an arrestee and you added an arrest down below, it would pull all of the information for that arrestee and put it into this section as well. You can also just come in and add if anything changes and you do have to put an arrest. So if this case originally was just a suspect and you sent it in for the month of May as just a suspect, and then that person gets arrested in June, you can come back and add that arrest to June, just putting, or to this case, putting the address date as June, and whenever you run the export, it'll pull this arrest as well. So you'll be able to track that even though it's a different month. All right, and the last step is going to be putting the victim-suspect relationship. So we'll come over here and click Add. Now we choose our victim, and we put in their relationship to the suspect. If we had a separate, or if we had more than one suspect in here, it would just show a list of all the suspects, and you would have to map a relationship to each of them. If you had 2 victims, then you would save this one, and you can see it adds this over here. Then you would click Add, which it's grayed out since we only have 1 victim. You would click Add over here to add in a new victim-offender relationship. All right. Other than all of that information, we are all done with this NIBRS review. We'll click Validate All, and it goes through every single segment in here and makes sure that all of the validation rules are checked. So we've got no errors found on this one. All right, so that was going deep and looking at every single field. If we go to this next one for larceny theft, this one we can go through a little bit faster now that this is our second NIBRS review to do. So we've got our location, we've got our larceny theft, we've got our victim in here, and there's no suspect on this one. And then we'll come down to properties, and we've got our stolen piece of property in here right now. So if we come in and edit this just to check it out, we've got stolen. We can change our NIBRS property loss type to stolen right there. And you can see the property type is clothes and furs, and that maps to clothes and furs over here. And then the value is going to be 200. One important thing to look at here is the value. So depending on your description right here, that is also going to depend on the value that you have. For some tricky ones are going to be for a credit card or for a identity document like an ID, you know, or a fake ID or something like that. Those are going to have a value of 0. And that is most confusing with a credit card, because if someone steals someone's credit card and steals $500 off of it, the way they want you to actually report it is the credit card was stolen and the card technically has no value to it. So it would just be 0. And then you put in a separate stolen property for money. And you would put in money as your description and put $500 as the value. So you'd have a stolen credit card at $0, stolen money at $500. All right, we'll save this stolen piece of property. And we'll go to our NIBRS review and start this one. So now, given everything that the officer has put in on the other side, again, we'll look through this case. Everything's on here. There's no cleared exceptionally, so we'll blank that out. And our location pulls in. We'll hit save. And remember, this cargo theft is for thefts. So now it automatically goes to NA, but it lets you know cargo theft must be no or yes if any of the offense codes are in this list. This offense code, the larceny theft other, is 23F. So we do have to check it off for that one. So we'll hit no because this isn't a cargo theft, and save, and there we go. So we're good on that page, and we can go to the next. Now we'll look at our offense, and again, similar to the vandalism, there's nothing else that we need to put on here. It was completed, so we don't need to change that, and everything else is good. So hit save and close. All right, next is our property. So we'll look in here and we're going to look at our stolen piece of property right here. we've got stolen, clothes and furs, 200, and then it automatically puts in our number of recovered motor vehicles, stolen motor vehicles and recovered motor vehicles, which is 0 for this one. So we'll save that. And let's think about if there was a recovered property. So this was stolen. What if they recover something for this piece of property? We can come up to add, and we'll add a recovered property. And you can see there's a couple different options for the property loss type. Burned is, and I'll actually start with this: destroyed, damaged, vandalism. You can only put a damaged property if you have the offense code of vandalism. That's why we were able to do it with the last case. Similar to that, you can only put burned if you have an arson for the offense. You can only put counterfeit or forged if you have counterfeit or forgery as an offense. And then for theft, any theft, you can put stolen and recovered. And then for seized, you can only put that if you have like a drug or something that was seized for the department. But we'll go ahead and add recovered. And we'll add the same property description that was on the other one, the clothes and furs. And let's say $200 of clothes and furs were stolen, but we only recovered $150. So we'll put in that value, and we'll put in our date recovered. We'll just say today. And then no stolen motor vehicles and no recovered motor vehicles. All right, so this one's all good. We'll hit save and close. And we're all good with this property segment. We've got our stolen and our recovered. Now for our suspect. So remember, there's no suspect on this case. How do you report that? So to report an unknown suspect, you need to come up to add, and you've got two options here: completely unknown suspect or partially unknown suspect. Partially unknown would be if you know some information about that person, and then completely unknown would be if you don't know anything. We don't know anything about this unknown suspect, so if we click that, it'll pop in just NA for everything, and you don't have to do anything else. Puts in completely unknown, and you're done. We'll go to victim, and you'll see all of the information pulls in from here. You'll also notice that this victim offense link is already linked. That's because on our case, if we go back up to our victim, you'll see that they are already connected to it through this side, through the actual case. All right, we'll come back over here, and that's actually all that we need to do on here. Well, actually, so let's pretend like that is what you thought, that you didn't have to add anything else. So we would save that, and then an error message would pop up letting you know that you do have to add a type of injury again for any individuals or police officers. So we'll come here. Oh, that's not the right one. We'll come and add a type of injury. For this was a larceny theft, so there was no type of injury there. All right, we'll save that. We'll come to arrestee. Again, no arrestee since we have an unknown suspect. And then the last one, this is a little weird, but you still do have to add a relationship, even though it's a completely unknown suspect. But you'll see what happens. We'll click add, and then we pick our victim. Then this completely unknown suspect needs to stay blank. If we forget that and we choose victim was an acquaintance, it'll tell you relationship code should be blank for a completely unknown suspect. So we'll hit X on that and save and close. All right, so we're done with this second call, and now we're going to do a validate all. Again, I always say do that at the very end just to make sure everything in there is good. So we've got no validation errors in there, and now we are ready to export. So these were both ones that were reported in March. So what we want to do is pull a data file for March that you can submit to the state. So to do that, we're going to start back from our main screen. So let's start back just from the screen at the beginning. You would go into case management either here or over here. And you've got an NIBRS, Ohio NIBRS. data extract right here. So you would click on that. You would put in your date from and date to. So let's do March 1st until March 31st. Then you've got your file name, which is just going to blank out. It's going to do that for you. You can put comments here, and this is what I use to kind of keep track of what extract that was, in case you have to pull 2 for 1 month or something like that. So I'm going to do March 1, and we'll hit extract. And you can see right down at the bottom, it pulls an extract file for you. Let me pull that up. So now this is going to be the file that you can submit to the state. I'll show you what it looks like. It's very confusing, but if we actually look at it, it's just a bunch of numbers and codes, all based on the codes and numbers that you choose for each segment. You can see here, though, this line is going to be that case number, because we've got the 20-003, and these are going to be all of the different segments for that case number. Same thing with this one. You've got 20-0034, and those are going to be all the segments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for that case. Again, you don't have to know that. All you have to know is that this is what you submit to the state. All of the stuff that you put into these NIBRS reviews are going to pull from ARMS and be put into that little file, that little confusing file, and then you send that to the state, and they run it through a checker, basically, and just let you know if anything was entered in wrong, or that your month is certified. So for certification, you would need to go through and fill out NIBRS reviews or OIBRS reviews for 3 months of data. And then once you do that, you just submit them one at a time for each month. They certify that month, and then you are certified. After 3 months, you're ready to stop reporting UCR summary and start only reporting NIBRS. All right, and so although it took a while to go through the first one, the second one was a little bit faster, but even then, the more you do them, the more they become just second nature, and you're putting in the same information for a lot of them, and it takes no time at all. All right, so we are going to go ahead and move on to our Q&A session. Let me open up this PowerPoint again. And what we are going to do for the Q&A session, we've got right here, this is what your Ring Central screen is going to look like. You should see at the very bottom the participants button. If you click on that, should have the sidebar open up over here. Should see a raise hand button down at the very bottom. And once you raise your hand, then we can unmute you and ask your question. And your hand will show up right there. And then once you're finished with your question, we'll mute you back and let the next person ask. All right, so let's go back to Q&A, and we'll pass it over to you guys. Does anyone have any questions about OIBRS or the certification process or anything like that? All right, and it looks like Ashley Butin, we've got a question from you. Let me go ahead and unmute you. All right, Ashley, you there?
She said she doesn't have a mic. Ashley, if you want to, go ahead and just type out your question. We'll be happy to answer it.
Yeah, that'll work.
Let's see. When we have a business as a victim, are we required to complete the victim and victim-suspect relationship segment?
For a, and I'll go ahead and get out of this PowerPoint so I can kind of show you through ARMS. So what Ashley is asking is for the victim right here. It doesn't always have to be individual. You can have a business as a victim or even government as a victim or something like that. If that is the case, you do not need a victim-offender relationship right here. Anytime the victim is, the only time you actually need a victim-suspect relationship is if the victim is either an individual or a police officer. Everything else, you don't have to add a victim-suspect relationship.
And then to answer her other part of the question, open up that victim for me, Doug.
Yep.
Why don't you go over real quick what the difference between what a business would look like here versus an individual?
Yeah, so I don't know if it'll show up well, but if we change this to business, business actually won't need any of this information. So a business would pull in, or you can put business, and then you can blank out everything else in here for the resident status and race and all that. So you'd be able to have business. You would still link it to the victim offense link, but you shouldn't need anything else for the type of injury or anything like that. This is still kind of pulling in, looks like, for victim type of individual, but on your actual case over here, you can specify that victim type. And if you specify it over here, you can just choose business, and that'll pull it in as a business.
Yeah, the system itself will try to help you out as much as possible. In a situation like this, for whatever reason, if you were having to switch an individual to a business, you may be better off just removing the victim entirely and then re-adding them in as a business.
Yeah.
That way it'll drop all that individual info that it pulled in automatically the first time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I think that about covers it. We are going to be recording, or we have been recording this video, so we will be posting this online later on this week. If you guys do have any questions related to the certification process, or even questions on the actual reviews, going through them and stuff like that, reach out to us. Let us know. We have email at support@arms.com, or you can give us a call at 1-800-776-6783, and just let us know if you need anything other than that. Okay, and so we'll go ahead and close off this call. I'll go ahead and let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope that everybody stays safe and everybody enjoys the weekend coming up. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you for your time.